This is number 3 in a. This is number 3, even though I'm going to load it up as number 1, when 1 is 3 and 3 is 1. Okay, and why is that? Because it just dawned on me like the dawn of light. Because I've learned, particularly when I was a child, when I acknowledged doing a map read that I was on a spiritual battlefield, and so it's like, trust no one. This is the invisible landscape. It's not what they look like. It's who they are. Right? Masking technology. So the trust no one comes into the fact that you realize that a spiritual battlefield known as the invisible landscape is known as a war of deception. Right? Question everything. So when I was a child, I realized this is an illusion. So now it's well, how do you know what's real, what's not real? Because I am what love is, and love is as real as it gets. That's how I know. That's knowing one from the other. Oh, so you know the difference between finite dead light and living light that goes on forever, gifting electrons because we're experiencing eternal absolute love. That's how simple it is to know that at age 4. Okay? That means that love is absolute trust. And the reason that love is absolute trust is because it does absolutely no harm to others. Now we're into what I do to you, I do to me. I'm not in the business of hurting me, so I'm not in the business of hurting you. And when I was a child growing up, I would say to other boys, listen, I'm not in the business of putting a bullseye on my back. You know how those want to shoot people in the back? And what were they called during cowboy days in Western movies? Cowards? Oh, the cow herd, herding the cows. See how that gets inverted? The language of inversion. Letters and numbers of inversion, the reversal current, the metatronic spiral, the death star. Falling stars, rising stars, expansion, compression. So when we get into trust issues, I've known this my whole life, when you get into the business of working with others as a spiritual partner or a spiritual guide, it is the art of healing, which is the art of communication, when you're working with somebody that has a shadow body that they are working with themselves, and not everyone acknowledges that's what's happening that they're dealing with, because the cobwebs have yet to be cleared, which are the nets that trap souls in a network traps, booby traps. So what I was doing as a child is I'm navigating through what? Frequency fences, jumping over fences, jumping over waves, right? Clearing the cobwebs away, which is using a radio set as a frequency modulator to be running a clear signal of 1. So that more and more beings that are here are experiencing the 1. The first 1. The first wave. The first signal. The EFF5 field. So now that we're talking about love, absolute love is absolute truth because it's absolute trust, because love tells no lies. And the tricky part of that I've shared before, when you get into do no harm, you don't want to communicate things that end up causing harm to yourself or harm to others when you're part of a command security team. Yeah. I think it was Og Tellez one time that mentioned something like, known unknowns, unknown knowns. No, I don't want to go off in that direction to open up that library that is connected to other cells that are happening simultaneously in order to experience something that I don't want to experience, because if I do, then it's going to become aware of what I become aware of. And then I'll be able to make the connections, the network connections of being logged in and logged out, and I'm in another network, in another matrix that it wants to attach itself to migrate, which is like jumping, like ion jumper cables, like Ethernet cables, right? Attachments, attaching itself. That's why when I was down there in Lapahoi and I was vibrating at such a high rate of speed at the atomic level, it's like, see ya. No, slow it all down, slow it all down, slow it all down. But a couple of months before that, and over that period of time, I was doing huge memory dumps as a polarity integrator, which is getting rid of a lot of stuff, because I gave a command function, an elemental command function, when I was a little boy, when I had it up and running at 4 years of age, right? I don't want to experience this, which means I don't want to load this program, right? But you realize why you're here, which means I'm going to allow myself to be programmed to speak and write the English language, because that is the language that most folks speak on the planet. So therefore, I can use that language to communicate to others in ways that let them know what we're doing at the time in which it's safe in which to release that information. So when it comes to healing and trust issues, and you want to open a girl's heart who has experienced trauma, dealing with trust issues, particularly with young women who've been abused in one way or another, could be their father, could be their mother, could be their siblings, could be at an elementary school, could be just walking down the street, and particularly with girls that are flowers, how sensitive they are, because the higher octave that the girl runs, all you got to do is translate that through the goddess, why they went after a goddess, why they go after goddess energy, right? It's like going into a girl's flower garden and destroying a girl's flower garden. That is off limits. When you realize that is a hospital zone, which is a healing zone, that gives you what we call a scale measurement of how bad it is. Right? Remember, like, even by their standards, they weren't bombing hospitals. Allow them to at least heal their wounded. No, we're going to hit their hospital. Right? So this is why there are certain safety factors built into the system that we put in there. Right? Anything's possible. When free will or free choices is part of the way that love works, because love is naturally wanting to seek to be free in order to distribute freely at no charge the highest acceleration of electrons, so that nobody in consciousness is experiencing a loss of voltage as a result of inverters that fell from grace, from God's grace. Right? So they don't honor the one. They don't honor love, which is the highest superconductor. So you realize how this works with trauma. Cellular trauma. Cell phone trauma. Living cell membrane trauma. A soul and a spirit. Sacred temples of light. Sacred temples of love. That's what we are. That's why we're here. So trust issues come through developing an avenue, or what I call a pathway, a navigational pathway, using a gyroscopic neurotransmitter, so that the other person on the receiving end can actually experience how deeply you feel by virtue of experiencing in them what I experience in me. Now they're experiencing the love in them that I'm experiencing in me. And what does that do? That opens their mic. That's right, just like Misa. Now that her mic is open, that means she's receptive. She's more receptive to the information. which is the data. That means that she now has a greater capacity to do what? Listen. Now she's experiencing more of what we are, which is what love is, and she will begin to experience the healing. That opens up a greater level of conversation and a greater level of trust. Now they can begin to learn how they can self-heal by the methods that we know how to use that, because we know how to do that.